Hi, everyone. I read the article about pre-K mobile learning um, and how that affected their instruction and different things like that. So, the study was trying to determine how the integration of mobile devices in a pre-K classroom could enhance the current instructional practices and create new opportunities for learning. So, what they were doing is they were using informal assessment to track that. So, they did use like their common benchmark assessments in phonological awareness, print concepts, um, oral language, and number sense to kind of judge the study. It's grounded in the theory of mobile learning, which is based on constructivism and um, pretty much believes that learning is continuous and extends outside of the classroom. I had never heard of the theory of mobile learning, so I thought that was really interesting. And I also really appreciated that the article talked about um, the importance of sound pedagogy and implementation of devices in mobile learning. And with that sound pedagogy, one-to-one learning has the potential to transform the classroom into a true learner-centered environment in which communication, collaboration, and creative problem solving flourish to create student-driven learning. And I couldn't agree with that more. I think, but that pedagogy piece and the implementation are vital um, when we're talking about one-to-one learning. I thought this study is really interesting because I am in a one-to-one school and district. So all of my first graders, they each have an iPad. To where this was really relevant to my setting, and I thought it was really interesting. So basically, over the course of the school year, they used a multitude of apps with the students. So counting apps, ABC apps, writing, tracing, sight words, matching letters and spelling, pretty much a lot of phonics apps and math number sense apps. It also addressed the fact that finding apps for the other categories like oral language and um, print concepts was really difficult. That kind of made me feel better because as a teacher, I struggle to find apps that support those areas as well. That's kind of where there's a hole in our technology um, instruction, for me at least. So the counting apps and the phonics apps are easier to find high quality resources for, but the other things are kind of difficult. So it was reassuring to see that in the study as well. Because of that, they talked about how in the informal assessments, the phonics skills and the number sense assessments, the scores were greater with the group that used the iPad apps. Whereas the other two categories, oral language and print concepts, were stayed the same because they kind of anticipated that because the lack of apps available for those concepts. So I thought that was interesting. I was also really pleased to see that because they did two groups, one group without iPads and one group with. And I was pleased to see that the one with iPads getting that exposure to the apps every day for no longer than about 15 minutes a day did score higher on those informal assessments. And I see that in my classroom. This research just supports that, which is always awesome to see. I also really liked the criteria that they had to keep an app on the iPad because that's really important. And one of the number one things they said is the student highly engaged in the app. And that meant that they were on task for the entire time. They were eager to play on the iPads the next day. They self-selected the app when given the choice. And if that wasn't the case, then they deleted the app off the iPad. And that's so important because no matter how good an app is, if a child isn't engaged in it and doesn't choose it, then it's worthless. So I liked that they included that in the criteria. They also said that the app needed to be appropriate and pointed out that there shouldn't be any, they said, rude sounds for incorrect answers to disrupt the classroom, and that students were appropriately challenged. I think that's important too because a lot of times games will, do a big X and a buzzer sound when they get the wrong answer. And for anyone, that's not really good, but definitely for small children, that's not creating a very positive experience for them. And it's not giving them a chance. A lot of time, those apps don't give them a chance to remediate or to fix their mistake, which isn't best practice. So, and then lastly, it talked about if it appeared to increase their knowledge on the subject area. So students thought through the problem and chose the correct answer rather than just simply going through the problem and choosing the correct answer with little thought. So the same things that we apply to our traditional instruction, but applied to our apps. And I think that's really important. So I really liked this article. I thought it was really interesting and, like I said, reassuring. Also, it kind of reignited the fact that our need for more apps for oral language and print knowledge, and the best way to do that, and how do we effectively create apps like that. So that's something I'll be thinking about.